Grace and peace, grace and peace. Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of You're Doing It Wrong. My name is Brandon, and I am excited to be here with you another month. Like I said, I can't explain how grateful I am just to have people who I know just to come on and be a part of this. Just literally a few seconds ago, KO's talking about how he don't like being in front of the camera, and it's like, to get people who are willing to make those sacrifices, it means a great deal to me. And so I'm just excited to have people here. But last month, I had the honor and the privilege of being joined by Tam and Benita, and we just talked about creating content. In fact, I know this, even though I'm recording in September, so it's going to be past due. I know they had a meeting for Call to Create, so I'm happy for them and what they are doing, and just being there for women, and not just women who are Christians, but just women who are non-believers who understand the value of just creating content. But we had just a great time last month just talking about that topic of creating content and just the struggles that we all have, just trying to figure it out, because we all don't know what in the world that we're doing, but we know that God has put this desire in us to create content, just trusting him as we go. This month, I'm joined by my brother. Super excited to have these guys here with me. And when I went out and just wanted to have this platform and this podcast, I wanted to be real and transparent. I didn't necessarily want to be necessarily overtly Christian, but it's undoubtedly gonna come out because that's who I am. And just realizing from the outside looking in, most people look at our faith as we kind of crazy, especially as black men. When you think of church, especially in the black context, it's usually just church mothers and women. Rarely are men leading in that forefront. But I'm grateful to be at a church where we don't just see strong black women, but strong black men who are leaders and pillars in the church and in the community. And these brothers definitely exemplify that. But we wanted just to have just real conversation, because we're not ignorant to the fact that people look at our faith and kind of doubt, what's going on. And so we wanted to talk about doubt from that perspective, and also talk about our own personal doubts that we have. So I'm just grateful to have these brothers here with me, KO and Manuel. How are y'all doing this morning, man?
Doing good, man. It's good to be here. Exciting.
How about you, KO, man?
I'm good, bro. I'm good.
You good? Well, we're going to jump right into this, because like I said, I wanted to be real, because a lot of times as Christians, we don't hold the mirror up to ourselves. And we don't realize how we contribute to other people's doubts and things that are going on. So I wanted to open up with this question: how have we as Christians contributed to the doubters? And I'll start with you, KL.
Man, I think in a lot of different ways. I think just generally, a lot of times we're just kind of judged by stereotypes, and those are usually kind of the worst of things. And instead of necessarily trying to help people understand who we are, we're trying to make them forget who we don't want them to think of us as, right? Mm-hmm. And so we don't necessarily deal with the conflict of, hey, I might also do some things or might have some beliefs that you don't like, but I'm not just that. I'm a holistic person. There are things that we might agree with. There are things that we might disagree with, but I can respectfully and lovingly do that, instead of necessarily just trying to combat you or put everything out as a lie, And I think that's kind of the hard thing about being a Christian, especially how you just said, just being also a black male that's a Christian with, the history of Christianity in our country. And not necessarily the biblical standards that are true, but the things that people kind of use to have power over us as a people, and the lies that were presented, to really kind of hold us back, and just kind of helping people to understand that that's not all there is to it. There is a lot more. It's a richer history. It's a history that spans back to Africa and all those things. But it's kind of hard to miss that, because there's so many lies mixed in with a little bit of a sprinkle of truth that can just really kind of throw people off. I mean, and even for me, threw me off as I was kind of really having my own search for what spirituality for me at one point in time meant. So yeah.
And what about you, E?
Yeah, I mean, I think my story, I think a lot of people in the church can kind of relate with just growing up in a Christian household and just in a very strict environment. And sometimes you look back, so I could be a little off here, mama. But like it seemed like there's a lot of answers that I had as me just personally being somebody who's like analytical and like to really try to put the dots and kind of make them fit together. I felt like a lot of the answer was just like have faith, and so I felt like the substance was missing and the rules was like heavy to keep, you know what I mean? And guys like judgmental, not really understanding grace and not really understanding the gospel. Me myself going off to college, it was like, number one, I was ill-equipped to be able to be in that atmosphere, which kind of left to just being an atheist at that time. And then some of the influences I was listening to, I was moving on towards like being my own God, and so, I mean, in that sense, like, there was some realness, I think, to God, because like that fear was kind of putting me to like, like I had a consciousness like, yo, you can't just be out here reckless fully, you know what I mean? But on the other side, it was like, the questions I really needed, you know what I mean? Like even like to like your book, like Burden of Proof, just the things you're addressing, there wasn't that or that coming, or maybe I wasn't searching from someone who was relative or had my perspective, you know what I mean? Or maybe even from a hip hop standpoint, the music I was listening to was shaping my, the way I was thinking about who I was as far as like wanting to be a God, So, so I just think one, just answering the questions in a way that you do, and I think somebody who's relative, maybe someone who looks like me, somebody I can see, and then I think on the other side of my story, after becoming from being an atheist to now, I actually forgot the thought I was going to say, but yeah. So I think one, just answering the questions, and someone that looks like you as well. So it'll probably hit me later, but yeah.
Nah, and then Ko, you had brought up something, and I think it kind of speaks to the misconceptions that we have of Christianity. You have mentioned that a lot of us just don't know the history of it. A lot of people think, Christianity, started, I've heard the Constantine argument, or even when you come to America, we think that's like the first time, especially black people, have known about it. And we go to a church and our pastor's just really heavy on understanding history and understanding, black representation in Scripture, or just people of color in Scripture, because most people don't even realize that, the people who they see Jews now is not the Jews who was back then, because it's so intermingled with European and things like that. But can you speak to just having this understanding of how rich, especially in our community, because I think that's one of the things that people doubt. We've heard it all the time, and I hate like even bringing it up, where we just talk about, Christianity being a white man's religion, because I've heard so many times, but I definitely did want to make sure that we touched on it in understanding just the African history that is rooted in Christianity. And I don't know if you could speak a little bit to that, especially like I said, us being at a church where we see it really heavily mentioned. And I guess I'll put it like this too, because even me being in seminary, I had no clue about some of these things, like Augustine. I didn't know about these people like that's from North Africa. Like, or even when you like we talk about like Egypt all the time, it's like, yo, Egypt's in Africa, bro. And we don't even like put two and two together. And a lot of times, I think as Christians, one of the reasons that people do doubt is because they don't have an accurate portrayal of what Christianity does look like. So I don't know if you could speak a little bit more.
Or just real quick, because he's gonna kill this. But I just think like you say certain names, like you automatically think it was white.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like Augustine or Tertullian.
You saw a picture.
Yeah,
of
you know what I mean?
As
a picture
white.
as
and
you
so
know.
you have that understanding.
Exactly. So as far as I know that, you go.
Well, see, honestly, for me, I think it's kind of more. Now, were there maybe some people that kind of took some creative liberties, especially when you're thinking about like pictures and things like that, or did it because they wanted to conform people not into like the image that God made them, but into their own image? I think that is the case. But I think for me, a lot of it is necessarily understanding that there's like a vast representation of people in Scripture, generally speaking. You know what I mean? Obviously from a distinct region of the world, but there's a vast representation of that. Like, Brandon, I know, man, because see, you're like the Bible scholar, like what's my man's name that they were like kind of like talking about as like they called him gosh, I can't remember his name. Not but I think it was like with something like Niger or you know what I'm talking about?
Nope.
Nah. Dang. But I mean, but there's there's a guy that's like a black guy that
In
they
Acts.
talk about. Yeah, I want to
Like,
say in
when
Acts.
he was laying out the deacons or
Yeah,
something?
yeah.
Yeah, they was laying out the deacons.
Yeah, and one of them was black.
Yeah.
I'm almost positive of it.
I
Like,
was
sure.
exposing a hole in my education right
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, bro. I couldn't think of the name. It's like, hey, man, hey, me and my brother right here, we're definitely not formally educated in it. But I mean, I think for me, one thing, if you're a person that likes to ask questions,
Yeah.
right, and you want to find out what those answers are to the best of your ability, I mean, you just kind of start piecing things together and learning, you know. And I did want to kind of go back and jump into something.
Okay.
You're talking about like growing up and like how that like shaped your identity kind of as a Christian or what you thought Christians were. Like for me, I grew up in the church. My dad was a minister, you know, and so I saw this representation of strong black men that believed in Jesus. Now, I would say, like, as far as some of the theological questions, I had some of the same ones.
Yeah.
And a lot of it was like, you know, have faith, or people would try to explain it. And I'm like, this intellectually doesn't make sense.
Yep.
And I mean, and not that everything has to make sense intellectually, but it was still kind of like, man, there seems to be so many holes here and such a high standard to live up to. I don't see how I can connect these two things together.
Yeah.
So I know for me, by the time I was like a teenager, I remember the day that I was just like, yo, I am out. Like, I mean, I'm not saying God don't exist, but God, you do your thing, and I'm going to do my thing over here, and let's just, and the two shall never meet, hopefully.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? As anything bad happening, you know, but I think that is, it's like, I think either way, it's hard, and I think that's the other thing, kind of going into that, it's like hard for someone to take your faith seriously if you don't take their question seriously, you know, and I think that's kind of a challenge necessarily for Christians. Not saying that you have to even have all the answers.
Yeah.
But if you just dismiss someone's questions that they mean nothing, like or whatever, you just need to just believe. It's like, well, you didn't even give me a basis to believe off of. It's like, you know what I mean? Like,
Definitely.
I believe things because I feel like there is some type of quality to believe in, right?
Yep.
It's like if somebody just went out and just told me like, yo, yeah, man, the sky's red outside.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I've seen the sky. It's blue all the time. You have to give me some type of other facts to back that up besides, or even more so, he's like, the sky's red outside. And I'm like, oh, snap. I want to go see it. Nah, don't go look. Just believe me. Like, look, like you sound crazy.
Yeah,
you
exactly.
sound crazy.
Yeah.
Let me go outside and see. Let me get some type of evidence to, like, bring this together. And I think, again, just generally, besides, like, whatever culture you come from, for the most part, people don't want to put like blind faith into anything that doesn't even make sense at all to them.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's just my point with that.
So it kind of go back to the other part I was thinking about is the narrative that's being told. And so like the narrative that, you know, I think a lot of people in our experience see it from like there's a standard or code of living you have to live up to. And you know, so these people in the Bible, like the Abrahams and stuff, we don't get it from it's not preached from a standard of like brokenness that they have. You know what I mean? Of people like, he's the father of faith, so like my faith needs to be at his level where I could sacrifice, you know, a kid. You know what I mean? Or you know, Paul, like he's this missionary journey, and so you look at these people not from the standard like, yo, these guys was broken. You know what I mean? And you see more of God's faithfulness. And then these guys like that are the standard, and you know that's how most people feel, like they don't feel like they meet the standard. And so I had a conversation with a cousin of mine, you know, and we was talking about just some hard things going through, and she was just asking about my faith. How can you keep your faith? I was like, I think it's my narrative. Like when I read the Bible now, I don't see like individuals I want to be like in the sense of they're the standard. I see like now I see it from like these guys are broken. I see if God doesn't come into the picture, you know, it's like, you know, because a lot of people think Christianity is to make your life better. You know what I mean? So it's like they want to see, like, okay, like Christianity should give me a better life. You know what I mean? Instead of like broken people. And if God doesn't intervene, you know what I mean? Like, you know, he doesn't get the glory or whatever the situation is. So it's like, if we're looking at it from, hey, like this Christian may be going through something. He may be struggling with doubt. He may be struggling with his faith or whatever the situation is. Like that's real and authentic. And that's what we see a lot in the Bible, you know, with every character in the Bible. But, you know, a lot of times we don't start there. We start with like, all right, the standard. Like, all right, you know, and there is a standard, but like it's broken people with God's faithfulness that allows them to be able to have the righteousness through Christ that we need and that we're living up to.
And can I kind of throw something in on? I feel like the flip side of that. I feel like that standard that is made, one, for like a Christian, you know, it's like there's only one person that's meeting that standard, and that's Jesus, right? Yeah. But on the, I feel like the standard, that idea of that standard, can kind of mess up the Christian, and it messes up the unbeliever, and it's kind of almost like a chain reaction, right? So for the unbeliever, you see that standard, and you see the people in the Bible, or you see Christian people, and it's like, oh, that's a good person, right? And they're good, and it's about them being good. And so they need to be praised for being good, or they need to be honored for being good, right? And then for Christians, we start believing that lie, so we're expecting some type of attention back because we're doing the good thing that God did, instead of like thinking about His grace and even allowing us to do or bear, you know, and not even, I don't even want to say bear good fruit because that's just such Christianese, but do good works because we have this relationship with Him, and He allows us and He gives us like grace to be able to do these good things. It's like, oh, nah, I'm the man, right? Then you get this like Christian celebrity thing, or the you know, the pastor that looks at you crazy if you don't say, you know, honor Reverend Bishop so and so. It's like, bro, it's not about you. You know what I mean? But that, it's kind of like this dual reality, right? You're trying to beef yourself up. These other people is like, well, I thought it was supposed to be about Jesus, but it's about this good person. So Christianity must be about doing good things and being a good person. And then we start kind of getting wrapped up in that lie, and so it's just like a vicious cycle, you know?
Yeah, I said too a lot of things that was really good. One of the things that you had mentioned, Kale, was this idea of just having this kind of blind faith. And that's one of the things that I think a lot of people question, like, I'm just simply supposed to believe because my pastor done told me or somebody done told me. And one of the things that attracted and appealed to me about Christianity is that God is a logical God. He's rational. So I appeal a lot of times to my reason and my logic to make sense of things. And I think for so many people, because they don't have that, where it's just like so faith and emotion based, that it's so fleeting. And most people are like, I ain't got time for that. But if you can provide them concrete evidence, so just in your hypothetical situation, and if I went outside and told you the sky was blue, but then I can go outside and prove it to you that the sky is blue, I think that's a different thing, you know? And so that's the thing. I could tell you, you know, God is real. God is real. How you know? You just got to believe. But then I say, no, I can go and prove to you God is real. How do I know? All humans have worth and value, right? Where they get this worth and value from. And just go to just concrete things that I can prove to you and show you, yo, God is truly real. And then something else that you had said that was really key, and just as we were speaking, kind of convicted me a little. It's like, you don't see any perfect person in Scripture. Like we talk about Abraham, you know, being this person of faith. It's like, bro, Abraham was like, God, I ain't got time. And we was talking about this the other day too. Is God? Abraham, he didn't have Genesis to look to. You know, he's a pagan.
Exactly.
He literally just hears this voice in his head saying, yo, leave your people and go to this other land. And dude was like, and then his wife is like, we finna do this. So I granted on that level, it's like, yo, what is you doing? But after God gives him the promise and say, you're gonna have a son, he's like, that ain't happening. He goes get Hagar, get her pregnant. And he's like, I ain't got time for this. And so he's already not only just disregarded what God had said, which is understandable because so much time had passed. Like, how many of us, God, you done told me this like 20 some odd years ago, still ain't happened. I'm finna take matters into my own hands. He takes matters into his own hands. Not only that, we hear the story about him lying, which again, understandable. And then God, you know, it's not a story of Abraham. It's more of a testament to what God has done through Abraham.
You got that right.
And so you see nothing but these broken people, and it's like, that's me. That's me, God. What you gonna do through this? And so when I had this question in mind, like how have Christians contributed to the doubters, my context, it sounded like both of y'all grew up in Christian homes. And not to say that I didn't grow up in a Christian home, but we just kind of went to church just because it was something. And we just what you do on Sunday. That's what we did. Now, God, I don't ever recall hearing the gospel. It wasn't like a super gospel saturated home. I appreciate where I came from, but it wasn't what I know now, if you understand what I'm saying. And so when the Lord started working on me, I ended up going to a Christian university, Liberty University, if those of you guys know, in Lynchburg, Virginia. I didn't know too much about it, but if anyone knows a little bit about Liberty, it was founded by Jerry Falwell Sr., and he actually passed the year I was actually going in, and his son took over. And so I remember being there, had a great time, proud to be an alumni, met some amazing people, met my wife there. So I don't ever take for granted why God brought me there. Yeah. But at the same time, I think it gives me a unique POV where I can look from the outside and say, a lot of my experience there, I could see how it was more conservative than Christian. Mm-hmm. And now that I've been so far removed from Liberty and in this political climate and seeing, where the president of the university tends to align himself, and I'm not mad at anybody who tends to align themselves that way, Republican, conservative, vote your interests, vote your views. I have absolutely no problem with that. My issue is when we tend to turn a blind eye on the bull crap that happens, and we just sweep it under the rug just because they align with us politically and not calling out the BS. And it's like, I can imagine from people from the outside looking in, for all the things that this president has done and just how he's acted, how he's treated people, it's the furthest thing from what you would think a Christian would be. But yet there's so many Christians who champion this dude like he's the greatest thing ever. Like I said, champion him, vote your interest, but don't act like this is like this perfect dude, and when he makes a mistake, don't call him out. But yet at the same time, what challenged me is like, as much as I want to be critical, it's like he's a broken individual. Mm-hmm. And as much as I want to doubt his own faith, and be like, bro, I don't know, I don't know about you, bro. It's like, that ain't my place. My place is to pray for this dude, pray for the president. As hard as that might be, as disgusted as I am with how they treat people, the policies that they put in place, just as ignorant as I may think they are, it's like grace is needed for them because I'm just as crazy as them. It's like, we can just see from what they put out in the public. It's like, what if all my crap was put out in the public? How would people view me? And so as much as I'm like, I don't really rock with these dudes, but you just finished saying, like, you see nothing but broken people in scripture. And it's like, if I'm a broken person looking at somebody else broken, like, what would that mean for me? But and then from that, I wanted to talk about just mainstream, how mainstream looks at Christianity and how they view us. What are your thoughts on that?
Yo, my world don't stop when the beats commence. Said I'm climbing up this ladder just to get over this fence and run far, far away from the games people play. In this melancholy modern day music Malay, touche, pussycats with lives to spare that kick in your heart, nice as hell, yeah. Be aware, beware, I hate to see you less a liver or worse. Polar bear, winter time, catch the river, now that's cold. And like that, now that's old. Didn't buy the last copy of this, now that's old. It's the pepper on your salt, my dudes, I grind it out. And the answer to the questions of life, I find it out. With that stress, I walk with access, be he who max.